is Bean to Barstool, a podcast that looks at the intersections of craft beer and craft chocolate. My name is David Nilsen. I'm a professional beer writer and an advanced cicerone, and the creator and host of this show. The music for this episode is by my dear friend, indie folk musician Anna P.S. You can find out more about Anna's music in the show notes or at her website, annapsmusic.com. You can find links and information about our guests in the show notes as well. I hope you enjoy this episode of Bean to Barstool. I first met Jenny Risner-Wade, the owner and chocolate maker at Yellowbird Chocolate of Albion, Michigan, at the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival in Rushville, Indiana, back in November. Our booths were set up next to each other, and we were able to hang out a bit at the vendor reception after the second day. Jenny started Yellowbird in 2015 in the small town of Albion, just as the town was revitalizing and bringing in new businesses. Around the same time, her husband, Ben Wade, was co-founding Albion Malleable Brewing, named for a former iron company that was one of the major employers in the town. When a chocolate maker and a brewer share a home and a life, ideas can flow back and forth and lead to unique collaborations. Jenny sent me home from the festival with a few of those collabs, including an Imperial Milk Stout called Unnecessary Evil, made with several forms of cacao from Yellowbird, and a few truffles made with Albion Malleable's American Molder Porter. I recently sat down with Jenny and Ben to talk about the collaborations between Yellowbird and Albion Malleable and the creative opportunities provided by having these runs side by side. At the outset, Jenny explains where the name Yellowbird came from.
Originally, it's my childhood nickname. Legend is evolving. The legend is evolving, but originally it's my childhood nickname. And then as the knowledge about chocolate and cacao grows, so does the legend. And I learn about things like the little birds that peck holes in the cacao pods and drink the juice.
They happen to be yellow.
That happen to be yellow.
Nice.
So
that's perfect. Ben, tell us a little bit about the brewery and specifically the focus on Belgian style ales.
Yeah, so Albion Malleable also was conceptualized around that same time, 2015. We opened our doors in the spring of 2018. I'd been homebrewing for about 10 or 12 years at that point, and as a career, I actually worked in fermentation science in the vaccine industry. So I had a lot of overlap between my hobby and sort of the scientific elements of what was happening. The Belgian styles, I think, like a lot of people, when craft beer was booming in the early 2000s, I was exploring everything I could get my hands on, and I really fell in love with those flavors. And I think kind of having a focus on the fermentation science, the fermentation side, the Belgian styles are the most yeast forward. They have more flavors derived from fermentation characteristics than, certainly from the American ales or lagers, which do everything they can to minimize or eliminate fermentation flavors and highlight malt and hops. And that was just kind of fascinating to me. So we were a little apprehensive about leaning too hard into the Belgian at launch, being in such a small town and not really knowing, kind of how a really niche focus was going to do. So we did open with some saisons and farmhouse styles, but we also, had our IPA and porter and a few others that I didn't tell people I was brewing with Belgian yeast to try to kind of ease them into it. And then a year or two in, I introduced kind of our main Belgian line with our blonde double, triple quad. And we started really playing around more with Golden Strong and different saison styles and beer de garde and some things that were definitely not as popular in the craft market, but we found they were consistently resonating with people when we made them, and the feedback was great. And our Belgian blonde almost instantly became our best-selling beer when we put it on, and it has remained so, for years since then. So.
Very cool. And the name Albion Malleable is from a steel company?
Yeah, so the locals here, pronounce it malleable. They kind of crunch it all together. That's kind of a fun little indicator of whether you're in Albion or reading it phonetically. I tell a story that I was in high school before I realized the factory wasn't called the Malibu. Just because it was so crunched up when people said it here. But the iron industry here, Malleable Iron was the largest employer in town for 100 years or more. It really was what built this city. There was a lot of elements that went into that name as well, ranging from our town history to the fact that the town that factory helped diversify the town, bringing in immigrants and Black workers from the South, made us a really diverse small town. We wanted to kind of celebrate that heritage, and then just the dictionary definition kind of sealed the deal when we were kind of looking it up, and we saw the statement about repeatedly hammered or beaten but not breaking. And it was just such a great analogy for, the small Midwest Rust Belt, town that had been through so many ups and downs over the years and seen the collapse of its industries, and still had a spirit here that, was strong and supportive. And we wanted to, celebrate that and kind of take that torch.
That's great. Jenny, you mentioned before we started that you just got done roasting some cacao. Where do you source your cacao from for your chocolate?
I use a couple sources like Uncommon Cacao, Meridian, Chocolate Alchemy. I've used those folks. Recently, I've been able to get cacao directly with Rajni of Dwar Chocolate. We were able to get quite a load of beans from Zorzal Conservation from Dominican Republic.
Very cool.
It's been really exciting because it was a direct transaction to a farm.
Yeah, that's cool. Let's talk a little bit about the collaborations you guys have had the chance to do together. I've had the chance to taste a couple of the bonbon truffles and, of course, the one beer. Let's start with the beer. This is Unnecessary Evil. Is that right? Tell us a little bit about the beer and how that's utilizing the cacao.
So it's an Imperial Sweet Stout. It went through a number of iterations. It kind of started early with just the idea we wanted to do something with chocolate, and I did like what other brewers do, and I ordered some nibs from a cocoa supply place online. They weren't the best quality, and I didn't really feel like it imparted a ton into the beer itself. So as Jenny and I talked, that she kind of got her business established, and we kind of talked about how to bring more of that flavor forward. We kind of explored some ingredients, what might be some more intense chocolate elements or components, and over a couple of different iterations, we kind of dialed into something that we're really very, very proud of and happy with. As a Belgian focused brewer, I don't really care for the term or the concept of dessert beer. I don't like something that's overly sweet and cloying and syrupy. Part of what drew me to the Belgian styles was they finish very dry and they're very drinkable. So I wanted to design a beer that was still a beer first and foremost, and didn't get lost in the chocolate, but had a very distinctive chocolate flavors that were recognizable. So the final iteration of this, we use actually 3 different components. It's a big mash bill. We use a lot of dark malts. A lot of chocolate flavors come from the malt itself. So dark roasted chocolate malt, roasted barley, some of the things you find in stouts. I actually use 3 or 4 different dark malts to kind of build some complexity in those dark flavors. Mm-hmm. And then near the end of the boil, we're putting in some very high quality cacao powder, cocoa powder, and into the wort at the very end. We don't boil that really hard. We do it enough to dissolve it, but we don't want to break down or drive off anything that's there. And then once we go to flame out in whirlpool, this is a phase of brewing that IPA brewers, and especially hazy IPA brewers, will dump a lot of hops once the temp comes down a little bit, so they're not denaturing anything there, but keeping the aromatics. We use cocoa husk at that point. We take a bunch of the spent bean husk from the process here at Yellowbird, basically make it like a big cocoa tea at flame out, and let it mix for a while in the whirlpool. And then we transfer that beer into the fermenter and go through the regular process with our house Belgian strain. And then late in fermentation, we still do that final cocoa nib aging process for about 2 to 3 weeks at the end to let it set there. So we're going for sort of layers of flavor, kind of making sure it's infused throughout. And as I mentioned, it is a sweet stout, meaning that it's brewed with some lactose. It's still fermented very dry, but the lactose is not fermentable. So you get a little bit of a residual sweetness there, which if you're going for chocolate, just like any other bar, if it's 100% chocolate, it tastes more like coffee or bitter, dark, and isn't necessarily recognizable to the beer drinker as the chocolate flavor. So we needed a little bit of that sweet backbone to make it a little bit more recognizable as chocolate to the drinker.
Jenny, what origins of cacao are you giving him for that beer?
Well, I would say Ben was really influenced by the cacao trip we took to Ecuador. He was able to see the importance of the farmers and the cooperatives the fermentation process, all of those things. And when we came back, he was really adamant to improve that beer. Like he said, he had started it. He was adamant that, we use as much in cacao as possible. And we used cocoa powder, heirloom cacao powder from Conexion. And then the beans, nibs, husk are Semiliki. They were from Semiliki.
Okay. What went into the selection process for the Semiliki forest?
The fudgy note of Semiliki compared to the other cacao I had. I think I had at that time Chivite, so that was lemony and citrusy, and that wasn't a character he wanted in the beer.
Yeah.
in the Imperial Stout. So Semiliki was the best one that I had.
It felt a little funny to me to say I want a chocolate tasting chocolate, but that's kind of really the criteria. Yeah. Really that sort of fudgy, we wanted this like a drinking chocolate kind of concept. So some of the other fantastic origins that she's had and that we tasted that had these sort of red fruit or lemony or citrus notes, like we felt they would get lost in the beer and they probably wouldn't come through that pronounced, and if they did, they probably wouldn't be the best match for a beer. So
it's kind of like when people talk about beer flavored beer, you're looking at what people are expecting to taste like beer or like chocolate.
Yeah, and I do use that term. It's kind of funny. We've actually this past year for the first time I brewed Pilsner, which when I started this business 7 years ago, I didn't think would be in my profile at all. But as a much like a lot of the industry, I've come to full circle to really appreciate the simplicity of that, and it's become one of my favorite things that we have on tap now.
So how do you see the Belgian yeast interacting in interesting ways with some of these more intense flavors in this beer?
Yeah, so I did a lot of work to choose the house strain that I use. It actually is, the origins are from a Belgian Golden Strong. So it's not the Trappist intense, banana clove flavor that some people think about as traditional Belgian beers. We do use that type of strain in our Iron Lion series. We call it our blonde double triple, where we're going for that. But this particular strain, I'm able to really control those characteristics through fermentation temperature pretty significantly. If we ferment around 68, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, it's actually relatively restrained. So we don't get an over the top Belgian-y note from the yeast. And if we do want it more intense, I can kind of let that temperature rise or not control the temp at all and let it free rise. And we get a lot of phenolics and a lot of esters and a lot of different flavors that way. For the chocolate beer, we keep it relatively controlled for unnecessary evil. We ferment at that cooler temp so that it doesn't become too much of a factor. I'm not sure whether in tasting the beer, you would pick out that it's a Belgian fermented beer. I do think there's a subtle, there's always a fruitiness that comes through from those Belgian flavors that's very different than American or other continental European strains. And much like craft chocolate, I think that's kind of a nice compliment at that low level. You get that just slight yeast fruitiness that is in there that just kind of makes it feel like a more complex chocolate rather than a one note, kind of an experience.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious about the cocoa powder. I don't see a lot of brewers working with that. What were you looking at as far as dosing rates with using that?
It was at least a pound per barrel. It might have been 2 pounds per barrel, so up to 14 pounds in a 7-barrel batch that I was using. That kind of dosage rate in general for stuff like this, I kind of fall back to my hops knowledge. So I was when I'm going for aromatics, and that's sort of my comparable point, I kind of default back to IPAs or some of these intense hop beers kind of have a saturation point sort of between 2 and 3 pounds per barrel that you don't really get a lot more out of. So we wanted to put as much in there as practical and economically feasible without having to break the bank on it. But we also didn't want to be wasteful. We didn't want to be adding something that wasn't going to continue to add a lot. So yeah, we're in that 1 to 2 pounds a barrel for those ingredients. I think for each of those ingredients, we kind of chose that kind of ballpark.
And on the nibs, you said you're adding toward the end of fermentation. I assume you're just doing that in secondary fermentation after you've crashed.
Yep. So not after crash. We're keeping it up at fermentation temps for a lot of that. You get better extraction of aromatics and flavors at room temp than you do at cooler temps. It takes longer. We will leave them in there post crash for a little while as well, and then rack off of it. My early experience was trying to let them free float and really like make sure I have a lot of surface contact area, and that's such a nightmare to clean up at the end. That only happened once. We use like hot bags, straining bags, to put those in through the top of the fermenter, fill them up, and let them kind of hang in the middle of the tank. We did on one occasion something we would like to revisit, kind of in the middle of this styling this batch in. We actually recouped those nibs at the end, dehydrated them, and took them back to the shop and made beer-infused chocolate, kind of the opposite direction. Rather than putting the beer in the chocolate, we kind of pulled the chocolate out of the beer. And that was a really fun experiment too.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to talk about that more in just a moment. Jenny, coming from the chocolate side, how do you feel about how those flavors come through in this beer?
I really appreciate beer that's made with good ingredients. And so like I don't like pumpkin beer if it doesn't include pumpkin. And chocolate stouts, chocolate beers, like I really want chocolate in there in some form or fashion. I don't want, just chocolate flavoring. The chocolate in this beer, it's really delightful. And I call it a dessert beer, just because that's how I enjoy that glass of beer. One of our other favorite ways to enjoy it is with ice cream.
Then it becomes a dessert.
Yeah. So then
it does make a fantastic float.
I can imagine. Yeah. Well, let's talk more about then the chocolate side of these collaborations. Tell us more about that bar. I've seen a couple other places do that, and it's always such an interesting outcome when you get the infusion of those flavors in a completely different way. So tell us a little bit more about that bar in particular.
So I recall that I made it was just a small batch, maybe like 5 or 6 pounds of chocolate that I ended up making with it. And we put it in bar form primarily, but then also I made like chocolate decorative shavings for those beer floats that went back to the brewery. But the chocolate bar, it was like a 66% dark chocolate, the beer infused, beer soaked cacao nibs that were dehydrated, cane sugar, and cocoa butter. That was it, in the bar. But somehow it tasted, so it's a dark chocolate bar, but somehow it tasted like a milk chocolate bar, primarily on like the second bite that you had of it. So your first bite, like it's a creamy, interesting, bitter. I didn't get bitter until like after swallowing.
That's one of the interesting things. When I've had another bar done this way, it was from nibs that had come out of a milk stout. And it was surprising how much of the hop character and even some hop bitterness came through that wasn't that apparent in the beer itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was creamy, like it was a milk chocolate. And then you had that, you could taste hops. It was just like really incredible. So it was quite an experience.
I would agree. I do think the chocolate bar had a hoppier profile than the beer did, and at the end. There must be something in that process where those terpenes or those hop oils are attracted in gathering those nibs. It would be an interesting study to find out what's going on there.
Yeah, for sure. I would really love to know what's going on with that. I assume you were able to have some of the beer fans taste the bar. What did they think of it?
So yeah, we did. We made some of the truffles bars. Some of these products have been available in the tap room to purchase or buy. But we've kind of alluded to a couple times. Our favorite experience with this was Jenny made these kind of coiled shavings, and we had these floats on as a special in the tap room. So we went to a local ice cream maker, got some very good vanilla bean ice cream, did a couple of scoops, poured the chocolate stout over them, and then put these chocolate shavings on the top. And it's just, I mean, it's something that we've been very, very proud of in our businesses. It's really a spectacular product, and it's always is met with a little bit of a skeptical reception at first. And people see beer and ice cream on the menu, and they're curious, but not always curious enough to place an order. And then it's one of these products that when you see one of them come out in the restaurant, they start popping up all over the place. It just takes somebody to put one out there and people to lay eyes on it to say, yeah, that seems pretty good. And then when they start seeing reactions, so that bitter beer chocolate on the top was a really nice kind of compliment to the ice cream and the overall presentation. It was really special.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's talk about some of the bonbons or truffles that you've done. I actually had, I believe, one of the porter ones that you'd given me that was very good. Tell me a little bit about developing those.
Well, I guess it started with the beer. The porter, American Molder at the brewery is one of my favorite beers. It goes with any kind of meal. It's just a really good porter, and it goes exceptionally well with chocolate. Any kind of chocolate I want to pair with it, it just goes well with. So beer truffles are not a new thing. I didn't come up with them. Everybody does them. That one is just, it just has to be done.
Your the ganache style with that though, is kind of dialed in over a little bit of time, and when you got to a point that you didn't have to heat it the same way, that really helped the beer profile come through, right?
We'll be right back.
Are you a craft beer enthusiast interested in learning about the San Diego beer scene? Join the hosts of the Capital of Craft podcast, brought to you by the San Diego Brewers Guild, where they explore the unique culture and innovation that defines San Diego's craft beer community. Hosted by Eric Fowler, Executive Director of the San Diego Brewers Guild, and Jeff Fox of Beer Media Co., this podcast offers a look into the trends, challenges, and stories that shape the local brewing community. From sustainable brewing practices to hop trends and navigating the complex world of brewery regulations, their episodes shine a light on the industry professionals behind San Diego's renowned beers. Whether you're a longtime industry professional or just a passionate beer enthusiast, their conversations offer fresh perspectives and valuable insights into what makes San Diego a true capital of craft beer. Subscribe to the Capital of Craft podcast on your favorite platform today and follow them on Instagram at SD Brewers. That's SD as in San Diego, at SD Brewers. Get ready to explore the flavors, stories, and craftsmanship that make San Diego's beer scene truly unique.
Yeah, so for the beer truffles, in lieu of cream or other liquid, I'm using the beer, and it just comes, to a boil to a certain temperature, and then incorporate it with the chocolate, and the flavors just go together.
Yeah, that's a pretty natural complement there between those flavors for sure. Have you had the chance to try it with other styles besides porter that would be a little bit more contrasting?
Yeah. I went back through our notes, and because I'll try to, make a beer ganache for whatever the new thing on tap is. And we did one with, it was a sour series.
A couple kettle sours.
Yeah. So it was a kettle sour. It's called Jackie Daytona, regular human beer. If you're a not Dark Shadows fan, but
yeah, what we do in the shadows,
yeah. I'm also a Dark Shadows fan.
It was a blood orange, Michigan cherry, and habanero kettle sour. So kind of low ABV, very, very, intensely tart and fruity. I think on the truffle side, those are kind of easier in some ways because you can kind of treat it like a fruit truffle, and it doesn't. I'm not sure they read as beery as
Sure.
Porter did,
Mhm.
but the complementary flavors, kind of having those available in the tap room for people to order a taste of the beer and the chocolate side by side is always an interesting experience.
What other ideas, either for beer or for chocolate, have you talked about for pursuing in the future? I assume you have other ideas swirling around for ways that you can incorporate these together.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in doing more chocolate sort of experiments. We don't have a really great pilot ability in our brewery, so it's kind of full batch. When we do some things with 10 taps, we really don't want to have more than one chocolate beer on at a given time for our lineup. But there are some other things I'd be interested in trying. I got a good buddy out in Wichita, Kansas, Dan Norton at Norton's Brewing Company, and when I visited him, he did a Kolsch that he aged on cocoa nibs. So as you were kind of asking about contrasting flavors in beer, or in the chocolate, this was kind of on the beer side, taking something that you really wouldn't associate with those types of flavors. And I was shocked at how beautifully the cocoa actually came through. Again, kind of our berry beer conversation, taking something that's very light, very clean, very crisp, kind of minimizing off flavors, and then intentionally putting that type of flavor in there. It was very, very clean, very drinkable. Yeah, not a dessert beer, and that didn't sweeten it up with anything. It was very interesting. So I'd like to, to try that. We have a very popular Kolsch as well. So something like a Kolsch or a Pilsner, I think would be an interesting one-off on a smaller scale to do as an experiment.
Yeah,
So
we've been seeing that a lot more with coffee beers, with people doing lower alcohol pale styles and just letting that really fresh coffee flavor come through. And I would love to see more people doing the same thing with cacao.
Yeah. I think there's an interesting opportunity there that I haven't seen a lot of exploration of.
Yeah.
How about on the chocolate side? Are there other ideas that you have where you'd like to use the beer?
Well, I make a chocolate stout cake. Again, that porter is just a wonderful beer to work with. That it just brings the right flavors into a chocolate dessert. So that one, I'm also interested in cocoa butter and how that could be incorporated into beverages. So
we're at Albion Malleable. We're in the process of making some changes to our licensing that would allow us to bring on wine and cocktail options in addition to the beer that we make. So we've started the conversation. I think one of our next things that we're going to have to invest some energy in is coming up with a real craft chocolate cocktail. We want to do something like the chocolate martini and coffee as well. Since Jenny roasts both of them here, we want to do something with coffee, something with chocolate, but we don't want to go out and buy the Godiva liqueur or
Right.
something. We want to figure out how to really incorporate these ingredients and make a really high quality version of a chocolate cocktail for the pub once that licensing is approved and ready to go. So
Yeah,
we're
that sounds
hopeful
awesome.
that there's more opportunities that really is going to open up the door for us to use ingredients and to do things more simply than having to commit to a 350 gallon batch of
Right.
beer. We can do some experiments and run some specials a little more fluidly that way.
Sure. Well, beyond just doing collaborations where you're using ingredients back and forth, I'm curious about the creative exchange of just the two of you being in conversation and being familiar with beer and chocolate, and how that changes your own creative thinking when you're just working on one or the other. Jenny, do you find that being around beer and being familiar with these styles and tasting these different things influences how you look at chocolate, even if you're not using the beer?
yeah, I like a lot of flavors, and I love food, and I love traveling, and I love gardening. So I'm really inspired by all of those things. And earlier this fall at the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival, at your beer pairing, you offered a bottle of Duchess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Duchesse
Yeah.
de Bourgogne. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I when I came back home, I told Ben, like, I really love this beer. Like, it was great with the chocolate. I think you had a milk chocolate cherry bar, but while I was sipping on it, all I could think was like, I want this with a feast. I want it with a lot of food. So our travel experiences and food experiences, we find inspiring, and then we'll talk about them and then incorporate them in some fashion later on.
Ben, how about you? How about being around chocolate and cacao, and even, as Jenny was saying, having traveled to the farms and seeing how it's grown and all that? How have those things influenced how you look at brewing?
Well, the agricultural part, like I said, it was really kind of eye-opening to me, knowing, a lot of people that are around chocolate kind of are aware of the dark side of that industry, of the mass chocolate industry, right? There's a lot of problems there. So having the opportunity to go in and visit farmers that are selling into the craft industry, seeing some people that are paid, fairly for what they're doing and that love what they do and the passion for what they do. It kind of makes me consider the stuff back here. We've moved into some more Michigan hops and Michigan malts since being back and exploring some more local agricultural products. And then the industry itself, one of when I started out in beer, 7-8 years ago, it was already pretty far into it was a very well established industry, right? And there's a lot of support organizations and a lot of great camaraderie and collaborations, and brewers were always very generous in with their time and knowledge in helping new folks out. And I see the chocolate industry as kind of where beer industry was maybe 25 years ago in that development, right? There's a lot of folks that are connecting and networking, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to join Jenny in some of these trips and meet some of the other people in the industry. And there's just a lot of really passionate people that really love, the product. They're none of these small craft chocolate people are in it because they think they're going to be rich by the end of the year, and doing what they're doing. It really is a labor of love, and it's refreshing to kind of step back to where I think the brewing industry was a little while ago, and see the excitement and hear the business ideas and hear the plans for growth. And I always walk away from these conversations and these opportunities thinking about how they apply to the brewery as well, and sort of questioning. I mean, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, the craft beer industry has kind of gotten comfortable, right? They've kind of gotten into the same festivals and the same routines and the same events. And I think chocolate is trying to find its spot still, and thinking outside the box. And it kind of forces us to reevaluate, where we are, and think about how we freshen up, what we're doing so that it doesn't become stagnant. And I think, chocolate is one of the most consumed agricultural products in the world, and beer is pretty ubiquitous as well. It's in pretty much every country, every place. But the mass versions of those that are everywhere, both of those products, aren't really great examples of the flavors and the potential of the products, right? So I think it shares a customer base who seeks, something better out of their out of that consumption, who wants a better version of the things that are familiar, or have been fortunate enough to travel or be someplace where they've experienced a better version, and now they're kind of eyes are open to the possibilities. And I think once you kind of go down that road, it's hard to go back, right? Once you kind of realize there's a better chocolate out there, there's better beer out there, there's a spot for the utility stuff as well, right? And then I think we're all sometimes want to crack open a PBR by a campfire or what, just refresh after mowing the lawn, and you're not that concerned about it. But it's also when you want to sit down and actually experience it, these products are something that when you're fortunate enough to have a truly amazing experience, it sticks with you, right? And you remember the location, you remember not just the flavor, but you remember the people and the setting and the environment and where you had it. And traveling certainly has done that for us. We've been fortunate enough to experience cacao straight from the fruit in Ecuador, and I've drank lager in Germany, and I had these moments where we're really will stick with you forever. And I think it incites a passion in us to want to bring that to other people. We want to try to recreate that experience here in our small town, and give people the opportunity to come in and sort of experience what we remember to the best of our ability to bring it to the customers.
Well, in order to be a good brewer or a good chocolate maker, you also have to be a good taster to be able to understand those flavors and how you're putting them together. How have you found that tasting both of these has improved your ability to understand flavor for what you're working on?
It's a learned thing, and that was surprising to me. I think a lot of people think you're either really great at it or you're not, but you really can learn it, and you can get better at it. And beer, I think when I started trying these other styles, they were so different and so flavorful compared to what I had that I'm not sure that I was slowing down to get any nuance out of it. It was just, instead of a light beer, you have this intense stout or this intensely bitter IPA. And that was kind of the starting point. I think Jenny actually probably opened my eyes more with chocolate the first time, and we did a tasting of multiple origins, and realizing that if you kind of sit slowly and let it melt and close your eyes and take it in, you can taste cherries or lemons or bananas, inside of this chocolate, versus it's just all chocolate. I was kind of shocked at how much variation there was. But I think just learning to slow down is a big part of it, to smell, look, observe, take in the texture, take in the mouthfeel. I think I've taken that back to the beer world since then, and it's helped to just kind of slow down and evaluate things a little more carefully, when you're tasting something new.
Yeah, I would say, being more mindful, it helps, to just be mindful, be present in the moment, all of that sort of language. But yeah, definitely like just slow down.
Well, we've talked a little bit throughout here about pairing, but I'm curious if you've had the opportunity to do any direct pairings between your beer and chocolate.
We have. It's been a while, and we talk about it a lot. We talk about doing the next one, and it's always something that's else that's more pressing in front of us. So we need to prioritize that. I think we do more of it at home, and we talk about it when there's a new beer or a new chocolate. I think we have a lot of conversations about these notes would be really great with X, Y, and Z. So. But as a practical execution, I think we have a lot of room to explore that more and to do more with it.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Right now, I have a lot of beans from Zorzal, Dominican Republic, and I'm just infatuated with this chocolate. It's so tasty and so incredible. So I'm talking about that a lot and sharing that with Ben, and what those notes would pair well with what he has on tap, or what new beer he's imagining to brew soon. So.
What story are you telling with Yellowbird and Albion Malleable?
Yeah, that's a lot to try to take in. I think for small business owners and in particular in small town, I think our stories are extremely important, right? Like that's really what we have to differentiate us from the other people out there. I think again, slowing down, appreciating, some finer things. I think that's kind of our goal, and a focus on quality and handmade, passionately made products. We're trying to get that message out. Certainly with the brewery, we have a full restaurant. We try to drive home the fact that we're scratch made all the time. We have a baker on staff that makes our buns. We grind our own hamburger up. We do a lot of things very not the most cost effective and restaurant throughput way, but we're going for something better. This chocolate beer is a great example of that, right? If you're a mega brewery and you're brewing 100,000 barrels at a time, you can't use Ecuadorian craft cacao powder from Conexion. You're never going to be able to afford to do that at that scale. So being small batch, being small affords us some opportunities that the bigger companies just can't do. We can make that investment into a single batch and charge appropriately by the glass to recoup it, because the plus or minus a percent yield isn't breaking the bank the same way it does for a mega brewery. So I think that's kind of the story that I would like to get out there is visiting these places that are real people doing things they're really passionate about at a scale where they can use real ingredients and real food. You're not going to get that from a chain restaurant. You're not going to get that from a mainstream mass market beer or chocolate producer. But you can come down to our small town and experience that.
You can find out more about both Albion Malleable Brewing and Yellowbird Chocolate in the show notes. Albion is just about 3 hours from where I live, so I'll definitely be heading up sometime soon. Maybe we'll even try to put together a pairing of some sort while I'm there. Jenny mentioned one of the pairings she enjoyed from the beer and chocolate pairing I led at the Midwest Craft Chocolate Festival. If you want to recreate that particular combination, it was Duchesse de Bouillon, a Flanders red ale, with Mocha Origins 72% dark Tanzania with cherries. Thanks so much to Jenny and Ben for coming on the show today, and to all of you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Bean to Barstool.